Greetings, everybody. Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council. This is Global Perspectives on Security, our international affairs webcast that digs a little bit deeper past the headlines, past the sound bites, past the talking points, into a better understanding of what's going on in the world today. And of course, in the world today, we are talking again about Ukraine, and we are joined with our good friend, Mick Mulroy, the co-director at the Lobo Institute. Mick is coming to us from, I believe it's Tampa, is it, Mick?
That's it. Tampa,
well,
Florida.
Thanks for coming on. For those of you who haven't met Mick before, he's the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, a retired CIA paramilitary operations officer and United States Marine. He's a national security analyst and co-founder of the Lobo Institute and a board member of the Plato Institute in Athens, Greece. Mick, welcome to the show. Let's talk Ukraine. Let me just pitch one out there for you. I'd like to start because so much has happened over the last 2.5 weeks since we spoke last, particularly the military and strategic situation on the ground. From how you see it, Mick, where are we at inside Ukraine?
So, Chris, it's clear to me that the Russians overestimated their own capabilities and underestimated the Ukrainian capabilities and their resolve. So one of their main objectives, if not the main objective, was to take Kyiv, the capital city, and decapitate the government. They proved to be completely incapable of doing so. So they have withdrawn about 2/3 of their force, maybe more, from the area around Kyiv, and they will likely redeploy these battalion tactical groups, as they call them, down to the eastern area in what's called the Donbas, to try to solidify and fortify their efforts down there and make it their main objective. This is going to be a serious battle because the Ukrainians have gone toe-to-toe with them there in essentially World War I era trench warfare. So I think what the Russians will try to do is encircle them, come from behind, and try to essentially trap the Ukrainian forces in this area. A secondary effort is likely going to be to keep pushing on the coastline from Russia all the way out to a key port city called Odessa, and either do an amphibious assault, a ground assault, or both to try to capture that key area and therefore trap Ukraine and block it from the sea, making it a landlocked country. So those are probably the military efforts that we're going to see. NATO and the United States are likely to start doing everything they can to get the Ukrainian army material that allows them to go on the counter attack or the offensive. And that's what they're doing. Nobody thought we would get to this stage. We need to start getting them transport helicopters, assault helicopters, main battle tanks. And we got, last I hear, we have about 153 main battle tanks going into country. And anything that they can do to go on the offensive and give them that maneuver capability that they need to actually fight and potentially win this conflict, which again, nobody thought was possible. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves or create any false expectations. But when you see this going the way it is a potential that the Ukrainians could really take it to the Russians if they get the right equipment, weapons, etc.
Mick, over the past 2 months, you and I have been talking about this, and we've raised several times that it's been a series of fairly predictable events, but I don't know if anybody predicted, at least on the military aspect, a turning of the tides, if you will, with what has happened. But let me ask you this. In the situation whereby Russia concentrates its efforts in the Donbas region, is this, from a geopolitical standpoint, an attempt for President Putin to claim some sort of victory, which would allow them to, continue with the peace talks and eventually disengage?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. So there's a lot of talk about this May 9th date where Russia, it's their victory over Nazi Germany. The Donbas has more ethnic Russians. There's not a whole lot of people that support anything the Russians are doing in Ukraine, but if there's any, they're in this area. So it is easier for them to fortify something they've already been fighting for, potentially gain a little more ground, and then, as you say, declare a victory, a Pyrrhic victory, if you will, but a victory from their perspective, and give them the propaganda, at least internally to Russia, that they're looking for. But it will obvious to the rest of the world be a very limited and mostly a failure of their overall military effort in Ukraine, which was, of course, at the beginning to annex the entire country. That just does not look like it's going to happen, not anywhere close.
Right. So, Mick, let's shift gears slightly and look at the more recent developments regarding allegations of war crimes. I wonder if you could give us your expert analysis in kind of two perspectives on this. One is the situation on the ground. Most of us who are watching this are interested, so we'll have seen the very gruesome pictures that are coming through the open source media. President Zelensky addressed the Security Council again, with what appears to be evidence of war crimes. So part one, how does that really work on the ground? And then if you would, part two, what is the ramification of war crimes allegations on the broader geopolitical dynamic surrounding Ukraine?
Yes, absolutely. So as somebody who has been in combat, been in war multiple times, I can say as a soldier, in my case, a Marine, what's happening there is not what soldiers do. It's not what soldiers do. It's not what undisciplined soldiers do. It is essentially what depraved criminals do. The stuff that I'm seeing is, and I think everybody is seeing, but obviously as an analyst with ABC, we see stuff they won't even put on the air, quite frankly, and I won't even repeat it because it's god awful. The stuff that's being done there should never have been done in human history, certainly not in 2022. And quite frankly, it's on a scale and scope that it's likely that it was either directed, certainly approved, maybe even directed by higher Russian authorities, because it's so broad. And we think it's only the tip of the iceberg, what we've seen so far. Just straight out murder of children, rape of women. I mean, we've even seen indications that they've taken a whole village out and run them over with tanks. So you really can't get worse than this. And the international community should rightfully be outraged, and everybody, all the way up the chain of command, should be held accountable. So to your question, how is that done? So the International Criminal Courts, which is the body that has the authority over crimes, especially if it goes up to and include a head of state, has been referred this case by 42 countries already. So 42, and usually this is done by one or two countries, 42 countries have already requested that the ICC conduct an investigation into the war crimes of the Russians in this area. So what does that mean? So they're going to have to send people on the ground, just like any criminal investigation, but this one obviously immense in scope, gather the information, start an investigation that would hopefully lead toward indictments of the military officers in charge, potentially up to include the president of Russia and the Minister of Defense. If that's the case, and they're indicted, obviously they are not going to go and serve or present themselves to the court. They'll likely hide in Russia. They can be tried in absentia, which means in your absence, fancy legal term. If they are convicted, then they will have these red notices that goes out to be arrested and then serve whatever sentence they come up with. Now they can stay in Russia, but I think what will happen is that the sanctions that have been imposed, the economic sanctions, will not be allowed to come off even after the war is over. Let's hope it is eventually over, until that these people present themselves for punishment. And I think that is where we are. So I do understand some of the skepticism of how they would actually be punished, but it is important even have the investigation so that the whole world knows what happened and that these individuals are brought to justice in any way possible.
Mick, how would you respond to the other point that emerges in this case, has emerged in the past in similar cases in Syria and elsewhere, whereby the international pressure to force a situation into an international jurisprudence through the ICC, be it war crimes, genocide, or other, can have the dynamic of prolonging conflict because those who may be indicted see no choice except to continue the conflict in hopes that they can strike a better deal if they win?
So certainly, if there was a chance that the country itself would fall, and that if you think of Milosevic, for example, and that a head of state could then be forced to trial like him, then I could see that potentially. Not that that means you shouldn't do it, but certainly it's a factor. But Russia, I don't think anybody thinks that we're going to topple Russia, the country, and depose the leadership. So they would still be able to hide out in the palaces around Moscow and probably not be held accountable if they're okay with the sanctions essentially being placed on them in perpetuity, if that's the intent. So I do think they will take that as a factor, but it's clear from all the actions, there's Russian diplomats being expelled from countries all over the world. There's a movement right now to have them removed from the Human Rights Council in the UN, which is, it's an abomination that they would even be on it. And if we could, they would probably have them removed from the Security Council. But I just don't think that's politically viable right now. Right. But these things are going to be in conjunction with all the efforts that's going in to provide the Ukrainians the military support they need to continue to fight and actually go on the offensive.
Well, Mick, thanks once again for that extraordinary analysis and the critique that you bring to this extremely dynamic situation, very complicated, both on the ground and then, as you look out into the world. Thanks for helping us make sense of this. I'd like to also quickly thank our very generous sponsors at the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Stockman Bank, and Allegiance, who help us bring this and many more programs to you. I would like to quickly remind everybody that tomorrow, 11 o'clock Mountain Time, we have a very special and exclusive event. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, will be joining us in an event for the Montana World Affairs Council. Specifically, we'll be live streaming that on our Facebook page. So if you're interested to get additional analysis from somebody who was there and really knows the region, Ambassador William Taylor will join us tomorrow, 11 to 12 Mountain Time. You can catch that live streamed on our Facebook. Mick, thanks again. Look forward to talking to you again next week. We thought we were predicting well. I don't know if we're predicting well anymore, but the situation is so dynamic that we need to have you come back on and give us some clear perspective on what's going on.
Absolutely, Chris. Great to be with you.
Excellent. Thanks again. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.